Good afternoon. My name is Márton Gyöngyösi. I'm Director for Political Relations with the European Christian Political Party. And we are in Strasbourg, in the building of the European Parliament, where we have the monthly plenary session of the Parliament. And as it is customary, there are a lot of interesting debates around resolutions and reports this week. And I have two prominent MEP guests here, Mr. Cristian Terheș from the ECR group from Romania. Hello. And also member of the European Christian Political Party, Bert-Jan Ruissen from the Netherlands, from the SGP party, also member of ECPP, and ECPP president, Mr. Valeriu Ghilețchi, who has been an MP himself and a politician for a long time. We have been discussing a lot the European Citizens Initiative, My Voice, My Choice, that was very controversial, that has been pushed for through an ECI, through a European Citizens Initiative. And this initiative has been finalized a few months ago by the collection of signatures. Over 1 million signatures have been collected. This is about the EU sponsoring cross-border abortions, a very controversial issue. However, the European citizens have signed this European Citizens Initiative, and the Commission has made a ruling that the European Social Fund, the ESF+, can be used by EU member states to finance cross-border abortions. What can we say about the ruling of the Commission? How acceptable is this, or how much? It's a very controversial issue. Member states have very different regulations on abortion. Healthcare is an EU competence under the treaties. Where lies the truth? What can we say about this decision of the Commission? Cristian or Bert-Jan?
You can start, Cristian.
Well, from our perspective, the issue of this European Citizens Initiative is first and foremost the topic of it. So you have this group of people in the EU that are lobbying that for some reason or another, they should be sponsored and paid from European funds to go in another country and have an abortion. I'm not going into if abortion is good or not. That's a different discussion. I'm just talking from a financial standpoint, right? So if they claim that it's their body, their choice, then why do we have to pay for it? At the end of the day, we did not force them to have a relationship with anybody. So this is creating a precedent that's it's opening a can of worms, because for every option, now you get to a point where I'm going to run an ECI and collect 1 million signatures, and I'm going to request now that I should be sponsored or paid off through these European funds. Then where do we stop with this? What about if tomorrow, for example, I want to change the oil in my car? Let's have an ECI initiative, and I'm sure not 1 million, hundreds of millions of people will sign for it. So this is where the pragmatism, I would say, comes into place, where we really have to decide beyond the position that someone might have in regards to abortion. I mean, is this okay for the European Union to create this kind of precedent where, okay, now I'm gonna ask the European Commission to pay my ticket and whatever, my hotel, to go in a different country and have an abortion? The idea itself is wrong. On top of that, these European funds that are coming from the states are making money, they have these budgets and stuff because they tax people, right? Well, maybe I have a conscience problem, I don't want to implicitly sponsor abortion. I don't agree with it. I don't want to support that, publicly or even indirectly financially. And it's sad that the current president of the Commission is pushing for these topics. I would say that more and more have nothing to do with not only with the law, the letter of the law, but the spirit of the European values. If you look back, I was just thinking today listening to the debates in the plenary, how easy we or the majority of the members of the parliament are throwing away the Christian values as the foundation of the European project. And if you read Schuman, for example, Robert Schuman, one of the founding fathers of the European project, he had a book called On Europe, or About Europe. And he mentioned that we could not have democracy without Christianity, because you need to have and acknowledge the dignity of human person, the fundamental human rights, the separation of powers. This is what the Judeo-Christian values and world developed. And I think it's important now, I would say, not to take this as a chance, to be sad or to be upset or to lose hope, but as an opportunity, I would say, to realize the huge treasure that we have, and to fight for these values to be respected again in the European Union.
Since we have mentioned the founding fathers, I mean, the whole EU as a project has started off with certain principled Christian political leaders, but also with some legal fundamental basis for the cooperation. These are the treaties.
Exactly.
When you read the treaties, it is rather clear what is an EU competence and what is not an EU competence. Bert-Jan, how legitimate is the EU in wanting to regulate such a controversial issue as abortion, especially when it is quite clear that healthcare does not seem to be an EU competence based on the treaties?
Yeah, I fully agree with what Cristian just said. Abortion is not the competence of the EU. It's up to the member states to decide whether they would like to see, let's say, abortion opportunities, facilities, abortion services in their country or not. It's up to the member states to decide. So this initiative, My Voice, My Choice, is really undermining the responsibility and the competences of the member states. In addition to that, I would also like to add what you said about the founding fathers and about the basic European values. I'm thinking about the Charter of the Human Rights. We have in our Charter of the Human Rights, we have Article 2. Everybody has the right to live. In my opinion, abortion is not in line with that basic principle. It's undermining that principle, because talking about abortion, what are we doing? To be honest, we are killing an unborn child. So how can you accept that when you at the same time respect and underline the need of the right to live? So from the point of the competence discussion, but also from a principle point of view, we have really big problems with this initiative. So we do what we can here in the European Parliament, try to block this initiative. Recently, talking about promotion for this initiative, the Commissioner Labib asked the MEPs in the committee meeting, she asked the MEPs to promote this initiative in the national member states. So the EU is not competent, but at the same time, the Commissioner is urging MEPs, urging us to promote this initiative. I also tabled questions about that, because that's also, in my opinion, then you are also not, let's say, not respecting the institutional.
Any responses yet from the Commission to your question?
Not yet, not yet.
Not yet.
I tabled the questions last week, so the Commission has 3 months to respond.
And usually it's taking 6.
Usually taking 6, yes.
No surprise.
Yes.
Valeriu, as president of a Christian political party and of a European party, as far as the program of the party is concerned and as far as the principles and the values of the party is concerned, where does the organization stand on this issue?
Well, as the president of the European Christian Political Party, I can say that I wholeheartedly support our MEPs, Mr. Terheș and Mr. Ruissen, in promoting these values here in the European Parliament. And there are amendments they also tabled, and we support those amendments. For us, one of the pillars of our program is human dignity. And we speak of human dignity, one of the values is life. And life is the most precious thing in life. So, and we believe that life starts with conception. So that's why we defend babies. Somebody is accusing us that we're against something. No, we are in favor. We're in favor of saving those babies. So that is why, so from a moral point of view, from a human dignity point of view, it's very important to understand why we stand and where we stand. Why we defend those babies that are not born yet, because they are humans and we must accept this as a fact. Then when it comes to the political side, I think Mr. Terheș mentioned one important point, that you see, the European Citizen Initiative must have some guidance. You cannot accept any initiative, and it's better to stop the initiative at the very beginning. We have the example of the initiative that took place in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, one of us. And during that initiative, there were collected almost 2 million signatures, but Commission rejected because they didn't like that initiative. So, which tells us that it's much wiser and much better to look at the initiative at the first stage, when the initiative is registered, and then to decide, is it our competence as European institution, as European Commission or not? And it's better to stop that initiative from the very beginning, rather than to come at the end and realize that this is something not good with the competence the European Commission has. So there are at least 2 points here, I think, that need to be taken in consideration.
The Commission might have also realized, because they rejected to do a binding legislation on this, so
yes,
they haven't, as far as I understand, the European Citizens Initiative, if the necessary amount of signatures are submitted, it doesn't give an obligation, but it's possible for the Commission to issue a binding
it's a pretext.
resolution. It's a pretext. But somehow they didn't do this. So I think, or my guess is, that someone in the Commission also thought that they are in trouble, they are trapped, because the citizens have collected the signatures, they have submitted it, they should, or they have the possibility to act, but at the end of the day, they didn't do this, but they said that there is an ESF plus
Yes.
fund which can be used for these purposes.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think of this solution, the ESF plus fund? Is that a way to go around this issue, or is that a solution?
It's not a solution.
It's not a solution. And I want to add something else here to, based on what my colleague Bert-Jan said. So we have the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. When we talk about rights, fundamental human rights, in order to have rights, the person has to be alive. Because that person doesn't have any rights, because that person doesn't have any obligations. This is a basic principle in the law. So in order to have rights, you have to have obligations. In order to be able to exercise both of them, you got to be alive. This is the reason why in all the constitutions, in all the treaties, in all the charters, in all the whatever, the first right is the right to life. Because without the right of life, there's no other right. But now there's a movement in Europe to include in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights the right to abortion.
Yes.
The right to abortion, it's fully contrary to the right to life.
Yes.
Because now here's the question. If a woman, just to be clarified, only a woman, a biological woman can get pregnant, because now we have a debate here where the majority of the parliament cannot define anymore what a woman is. And they are claiming that even a man can give birth. So I don't know how, but anyway. So just to be specific, right? Only a woman can get pregnant. So between the decision of a woman to kill the baby and the right of that baby, unborn child, unborn person, because we are talking about not only a child, about a person, right? Which right is more important? Because if we acknowledge that the right to take the life away from that unborn child, it's superior to the right of life of that child, the same principle will be applied at the end of our lives. So when we will be old, when we will be sick, when we will not be as productive, I would say, as we are now, somebody, a third person, not even ourselves, somebody else is going to decide, you know what, it's not worth for you to live anymore. It's costing the society too much. So exactly the principle that it's applied at the beginning of the life is going to be applied at the end of the life. This is the reason why for us as a Christian party, we fight for respecting the life from the conception to the natural death.
Sure.
Because otherwise, none of any other rights will be safeguarded. Because somebody more powerful than us, right, will come and say, you know what, you're not worth living anymore. And we have to speak here for those unborn persons, okay, that cannot speak for themselves. So when we will be old, others will be able to defend our rights.
Now, on this week's parliamentary agenda, this issue, or this ethical issue, and this very controversial issue, is once again on the table in the form of a report, the report on the situation of fundamental rights in the European Union in 2024-2025. The author is an MEP, Anna Strollenberg. And it's a vast report. I have read it myself, and if I understand correctly, there will be a debate on the report tomorrow and voting later on Thursday. But it's a report which, well, if I read through it, it has certainly some positive elements when it comes to fight against anti-Semitism and protection against disinformation and so on and so forth. However, it's quite apparent that, first of all, the European Citizens Initiative, My Voice, My Choice, is also mentioned on a number of occasions in this report. And also it seems to be very outspoken and pronounced on the gender ideological side and the rights of the LGBTQ community. What is your position on the report? First, just generally, how do you see the report? How balanced is it? Or if you find some critical points, what are they? Or if you see any positive sides, you can also say that. But first of all, the more critical opinions I would be interested to know.
Talking about the Strollenberg report, what you mentioned, indeed, there are some positive elements in this report. For example, some language about the fight against anti-Semitism, about the importance of equal rights for persons with disabilities and so on. So yes, there are some positive parts in this report, but generally speaking, in my opinion, this report is very one-sided. Nothing about discrimination of Christians, for example, but a lot of language about Islamophobia. Text about the risk of the far rights, but nothing about the far lefts, for example. Indeed, what you said about My Voice, My Choice, about the LGBTQ agenda, the gender ideology. So yes, it's the report about the human rights situation in the EU, but with very one-sided, controversial focus points. So I shall I will vote against this report. For me, it's very problematic, and I can imagine that for a lot of colleagues in the ECR, this report is very problematic.
Well, a number of amendments have also been tabled by yourselves as signatories, but also as a group. You are both members of the ECR group, and I have seen that a number of amendments have been submitted, which are not always sufficient to turn a report into positive. However, they might be sufficient just to make some adjustments to the overall picture. But you see that there is, under no circumstances is it acceptable.
I'm afraid not.
The report, or it's not possible to amend it.
You know, Ronald Reagan used to say that you don't want to know how two things are made, laws and sausages. Because you start with a good idea, and then everybody puts in it whatever, you know, so it's like a black box. Something goes in, and you don't know what comes out. It's the same thing with these reports. The title is very good, right? Respecting, you know, the reports on human rights, and it's great, right? Respecting human rights. But then when you look into details, you know, you're like, oh boy. So, do we acknowledge as a human right the fact, so to speak, that an individual claims to be an animal, and then will acknowledge that human being is an animal? If a person, this is why I raised this issue in the parliament. If a person claims to be a car, are we going to give that person a license plate instead of an ID card? We had a debate yesterday and we voted today on the gender-based consent rape, right? And I raised the following issue because they were claiming that only men are raping women. And that's the reality 99.99% of the cases. The problem is that they cannot define what a woman is anymore. So if you cannot define what a woman is anymore, how can you define who is the victim and who is the perpetrator? Because if a man, for example, who pretends to be a woman or auto-identifies as a woman, in the eyes of the law, as they claim, has to be acknowledged as a woman. So if this man who pretends to be a woman is physically or sexually aggressing a woman, is that a kind of a lesbian relationship or is an abuse between a man and a woman? You see how laws, since the beginning of time, when law was written, the words are supposed to describe specific and concrete realities. For us as Christians, when we read the Bible, when the world was created through words, right? God said and it was done. So the words describe specific, concrete realities that did not, commingle with each other. Now what they are doing, this is a part of a neo-Marxist theory. If they cannot change the law, they change the definition of the terms in the law. So if you have, for example, human rights, the title, is that you like the title, right? But then they empty the definition and they fill it up with new meanings. If we as Christians and if we as even if you're not let's say a faithful person, it's creating many problems in the society because you will have more and more laws that will not be able to describe concrete realities and you will not be able to behave anymore. Here's something else. Every time when there's something, pay very close attention to what the European Commission does. They never come up and say, we made a mistake. They never come up and say, we want to remove, or abolish whatever law. No. They always say, there's not enough. So they ask for more laws, for more regulations, and the more you have with these unspecific definitions of concrete realities like a man, woman, person, we are at the wage of collapsing as a society. And it's our duty, our job, I would say, as elected official here, even if right now we are in a minority, to fight for this and explain this. And hopefully people will understand this in Europe, because otherwise the whole society is going to collapse because we will not be able to even communicate with each other if we don't know anymore what a woman is and what a man is. When I raised this issue yesterday in the plenary, somebody from the left told me, who are you as a politician to say what is a woman? What exactly? But what is your job to say that a man who pretends to be a woman is a woman? So imagine the kind of debates we have right now in the parliament. I hope more and more Europeans will be looking at this kind of nonsense that is spoken here, just to understand the danger that we are facing as a European Union.
Now, as a specific issue, when we are reading through the report, there is one, since we have started off our conversation with the My Voice, My Choice initiative, there is a very specific reference to, I think it's the quote, proper follow-up on the My Voice, My Choice initiative. What does Ms. Trollenberg mean? What is a proper follow-up? For me, I understand the signatures were collected, it was submitted to the Commission. The Commission gave a response. You can use the ESF Plus funds. However, here in the report, it says a proper follow-up on the My Voice, My Choice. What could I, we don't read other people's minds, but what do you think she meant by a proper follow-up on the My Voice, My Choice? What can be expected on this?
I think she meant at least more money for it.
As always.
As always. And that's also, I think, the reasons that in the report we voted on today about the multi-annual financial framework, there you will also find a reference to the My Voice, My Choice initiative. So they are really asking for more money. And the fact that the Commission is now using the social funds, well, they're happy with that. But I think what they prefer is they prefer to see and to have and to create a specific instrument for promoting the abortion. That's what I think.
So not just included in the ESF Plus, but to come up with a specific instrument and a specific budget for.
But I know there are different opinions in the Parliament about this. I can imagine that, for example, in the EPP, colleagues are saying, well, let's not create a specific instrument for that, and well, let's allow the Commission, give them some space of maneuver to use the social fund for it. But yes, I think the real promoters of this initiative, from Social Democrats and the left and the Greens and so on, they really would like to see a specific instrument for that.
Created for it. So that's what proper follow-up means.
That's my interpretation.
Yes, it's well, I didn't understand it at first, so I thought you might have a better guess than I do. But another controversial issue, which is very, like when you just read through the report, which is very strongly defined and requested in the report, is to criminalize hate speech.
Yes.
I know that the freedom of speech is a very important topic these days, with all the Digital Services Act coming into force, with the regulation of AI, with various platforms putting consent requirements for users, whatever. It kind of pops out this intention of criminalizing hate speech. And on the one hand, it looks like a very positive initiative, because nobody likes hate speech, and we all know through European history where hate speech can lead. Mm-hmm. However, when it comes to the regulation of hate speech and criminalizing it, especially when you are looking at when you're looking at it in the context of the freedom of speech, what do you think of this particular proposal in the report? Is this something that we can support, or is this something positive, or are there some risks to the proposal of Ms. Trollenberg?
I really see big risks here. I think as ECPP, we all agree we are against hate speech. We would like to support, let's say, respect for each other. But the problem here is, what's the definition of hate speech? And when the definition is very broad, and here the definition is very broad, then you can ask the question, what are the consequences? For example, when I speak about same-sex marriage, and I refer to the Bible, and I say as Christian, well, I really believe that the Bible teaches us that same-sex marriage is not in line with the commandments of God. Imagine that I explain that and say that here publicly. I'm afraid that with this new definition of hate speech, this will be considered as hate speech. And then we end up in a situation that this concept will then really undermine the freedom of expression and the freedom of religion and belief. So this is very problematic, and you can also ask the question, is this a responsibility of the EU? I really believe that these kinds of issues, talking about hate speech, is also, in my opinion, a competence of the member states. Because it's so sensitive, how to define this?
Your fear might be very well founded, because this section in the report is under the heading gender-based violence and rights of LGBTQ people.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I was also wondering that when it comes to hate speech, which can mean so many things.
Yes.
I mean, hate can refer to so many things. It can be aimed at so many different things. Why is it under the LGBTQ rights heading? So I was also a bit curious why it comes under this article and under this heading. Sure. Cristian, how do you see hate speech and the regulation of hate speech?
There's a theory in communication that states, he who frames the argument wins the debate. If you read, for example, Marx's philosophy, you will see that he played a lot, based on his philosophy, the language, there's a whole philosophy based on language that was developed, This is one example where they use words and language to redefine realities in order to domesticate societies. So if you ask anybody randomly, are you against hate speech? Oh, yes.
Sure.
Because it's a term that has different meanings to different people. When Obama ran for office in the US, his logo or his motto was change. Well, change could mean many things to every person, If you do not define these words specifically, we will end up to a point where, exactly as is happening right now, if you speak the truth or you believe, you will be prosecuted because it might hurt someone else. There's something else. We live in a society where we are not the same. We have different thoughts, different personalities, whatever. It's normal that in such a society, I might say something that might hurt your feeling. But it doesn't mean that what I'm saying, it's a criminal offense. If I go and if I say, kill whatever, all the blondes or something, that's a problem. But if I say something, that just it's hurting your feeling because you have whatever. So we will end up to a point where people will not be able to properly communicate with each other, which is going to create a lot of frustration in the society. And usually when people are very frustrated and they cannot express that frustration through words, they will use violence. And this is the reason why you see right now so many people, both on the left and on the right, look at what is happening in the US, in many other places, that are using violence to express themselves. Violence is not the solution. But you rather have public debates, and in an agora, so to speak, right?
The violence, yeah.
Than to use violence.
Yeah.
But the problem is that we can't even have in this plenary this kind of debate. When I stated, for example, in one of my speeches here that pervert males who pretend to be women are allowed to serve penal sentences in female prisons where obviously they leave a lot of women pregnant, somebody asked that I should be sanctioned because my speech was homophobic. It is not. It's a reality. A man who pretends to be a woman in many Western countries are allowed by judges to serve sentences in female prison, and they are in prison, or they were convicted for sexual crimes. So it's like, punishing, a bank robber, right, to serve a sentence in a bank. This is where we are right now, and these issues have to be addressed clearly, strongly, with respect, but they have to be addressed. And again, he who frames the argument wins the debate. So the report is talking about gender-based violence. What does that mean? Based on the Istanbul Convention, gender is a social construct. So if you see, slowly they are replacing the word sex as a biological sex, or as an attribute to identify and differentiate two people to gender. Gender is a social construct. Gender is not it's not a matter of identification, but a matter of identity, the way you claim or you think of yourself. But we cannot operate in a society where we change the rules in such a subjective way where the rule is bending based on how you feel. Because the laws should change or constrain our actions, not our thoughts and not our feelings. But we got to a point right now where, based on somebody else's feelings, your actions will be criminalized. So if I do something and he does something, if I do something towards you and you feel offended, my action is criminalized. If he does something against him and he's not offended, his action is not criminalized. Is that correct? How do we behave? The role of the role of the law, and the reason why the laws are public. If you remember in the Old Testament, Moses was told, when he received the 10 Commandments, to display those 10 Commandments everywhere so everybody could see them and adjust their behavior to make sure that they'll follow the law. We will not be able to follow any laws anymore because the definition and the words have different meanings. The definitions are so, elastic, so to speak, that you don't know how to adjust your behavior anymore. And this is a huge risk that the current society has. And I'm glad that our colleagues here, in the ECR group, in the ECPP party, we fight for this because it's important to have voices. Hopefully in the next term we will have even more voices that will be fighting for this good fight, so to speak.
Valeriu, are there any limits to the freedom of speech? And if so, should speech be criminalized under any circumstances?
Let's go a little bit back to the human rights report, because as it was mentioned, the concept of human rights is a product of Christian worldview. So, I think Christianity can take the credit for, creating this concept of human rights, human dignity, human rights. Unfortunately, in the last, years, let's say probably last decade or two, we have seen a lot of ideology in the concept of human rights. And that is a problem. I was born in the Soviet Union. I know what ideology can do to the society, can do to the legislation and so on. So that is a very important thing to be aware. And what we see in this report, we see a strong ideological component, like gender ideology, and when it comes to LGBTQI, the same, it's an ideological component there. I remember when in 2016, I ran for presidency in Moldova, and I, in my TV debates, public debates, I would make a reference to our constitution. And in the Moldovan constitution, it says that the marriage is a union between man and woman. And then after the elections were over, some of NGOs, they qualified my speech as a homophobic speech, as hate speech. I said, hey, listen, I made the reference to the Constitution of the Republic of Moldova. How can you say that this is a homophobic speech when I made a clear reference to an article in the Constitution that defines the marriage? So then, we need to be aware of this. And when it comes to, again, fundamental rights, so by the way, hate speech, one of the problems, as Mr. Terheș mentioned, this we don't have, Mr. Ruissen also, we don't have the clear definition. Another very big problem, it's just like one-way street. So it touches one segment. And we have so many aspects in our society, and those aspects are completely neglected. So we need, of course, to have some rules for a public debate, not to attack persons, not to, have hatred in our speech. But that is a total different story than this ideology that we see there. And by the way, when I was a member of the Parliamentary Council of Europe, I had a report that defended parents to raise their children in accordance to their religious and philosophical convictions. And now we see that you put pressure, you actually take this right from parents through so-called human rights. Parents have this right to appraise or to educate, to raise their children in accordance to their conviction. It's a fundamental right. It's in the Universal Charter of Human Rights and so on. So then we need to, in my opinion, as again Mr. Terheș mentioned, we as an European Christian political party, we believe that we need to go back to the foundation. Back to the foundation of the European Union, back to the foundation of Human Rights Charter, back to the foundation of the Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because those foundations are very healthy today. And this will give us kind of like assurance that we are going into the right direction.
As far as the report itself is concerned, it's on the table, and ECR has submitted a number of amendments, if I'm not mistaken, to various points in the report. Is that what MEPs can do with a report like this at this stage? So what are the responsibilities, and what can an MEP do in this situation, apart from the, if you can maybe speak a bit about the amendments. Are there any amendments that you would specifically like to mention or draw the attention to, or which is kind of like very important to follow during the votes now? And if, regardless of what happens with the amendments and with the report, what can the MEPs do in a situation like this?
Well, if I may, I can mention maybe one specific amendment. In our amendment, we say, well, please, let's be careful and let's respect the freedom of religion, and let's respect the freedom of expression. When somebody is telling something based on Christian values and based on the Bible, for example, please don't undermine that and respect that. So we stress the importance of freedom of expression and freedom of religion of belief in one of our amendments. So that's indeed exactly what we can do. We can try to change this report by using the instrument of amending this resolution. The good news, nevertheless, the good news is we are talking about a resolution which is not binding. It is just, let's say, an opinion of the Parliament and the Council, and the Commission are not obliged, let's say, to come as a kind of a follow-up. That gives us some, let's say, space of maneuver, and that's the positive element of this file, to be honest. It's not directly binding. Yeah.
Cristian?
We are talking right now about the file that's in the plenary. But the work on this file started in committees way before, months back. We table different amendments in committees. Depends, who's working on that committee. For example, usually for this is Libe or others. So the first fight starts, at least the fight in the parliament. The first fight starts in the committees.
Committees, yeah.
That's where we table amendments and we try to adjust the text, as much as possible. So after we table amendments, the document, the file goes into a negotiation process where you have a rapporteur and shadow rapporteurs or co-rapporteurs on behalf of all the other groups. And they are trying to negotiate on the text and come up with the so-called compromises. I don't like the term too much, but let's go with it for now. Because the rapporteur is trying to get a majority in order for the report to pass. So the first step, it's tabling amendments. Second step, it's when we vote on the final report in the committee. That's where you can vote on certain amendments, for or against or whatever, in order to clean the text even more. Then the text goes into a plenary like this report right now. We can also table plenary amendments, but the rules are very strict. Often we need to collect 72 signatures, physical signatures, We know the final agenda, for example, on Thursday afternoon. Well, in Thursday afternoon, there are no MEPs anymore, or the majority of them are gone, right? On Friday, you got a call, so they made a process very, very difficult in order to be able, let's say, to clean up the text towards the final stage. The third stage or the third step, it's once it's in the plenary, let's say you table amendments or you are not able to table amendments, we can table the so-called either split votes or separate votes, where we vote on amendments that are already in the text. So if we were not able in the early stage to change or to adjust the content of the report, then we can erase certain things from the report with this. So there are different legislative tactics, I would say, that we could use, to do this. But this is a very laborious work.
But the amendments tabled now, they are supported with the necessary amount of signatures.
That's the reason why they are. That's the reason why they are up to vote. Otherwise, they would not even be on the list.
Yes.
But I mentioned the procedures inside of the European Parliament. But there is also another key element here: the public. The public should be paying attention to what is discussed here and to what is voted here. The votes are public now. Anyone can go and see exactly how their MEPs voted, and to see if they agree with how they voted. And if a concerned citizen does not agree with how a certain MEP, from his country voted, should pick up the phone, call, or write emails, or visit his office, either here or in his member states, just to persuade him to vote in a different way. We don't hear the voices of these concerned citizens too much. That's the problem.
The answer to that might be that it's a non-binding resolution.
But it's not. Well, it's not binding.
Really,
but the problem is it's creating a narrative. So you have a small reference. I see how they are doing it. They insert a certain word in a very benign resolution.
And refer back to it.
Exactly. 2 months from there, then they refer to that. So now you have 2 sources. Then there's another one. Now you have 3. So in 6 months, in a year, you have 10 different documents that are kind of, quoting each other. And you don't even realize, where is it coming from. This is the reason why you have to be very, very careful with this legislative processes and these files, because if you're not paying attention at the beginning of the process, by the time you wake up, exactly the discussion that we had now about the right to life, about human rights, it's very hard now to change it back.
It's good. So we will follow the lifeline of this report on Thursday and of the amendments and see how it will pass. And it appears that this discussion is not going to get off the agenda. There is always another plenary, another report, and another resolution whereby it's going to be picked up. So thank you so much for this discussion, and we hope that you will continue the good fight. Also, ECPP as a European party will do its part in support of its MEPs and the work in the European Parliament. I thank you very much for the attention, and we will continue this discussion in the future as well. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.